Hi, my name is Mallika Joshi. I'm a third year in the BA/MD program at the UMKC School of Medicine, and today I'll be presenting Improving the Sleep Quality of UMKC Medical Students, a Quality Improvement Project. Get the next slide, please. So burnout is a pervasive problem within the medical community, and it's often the culmination of neglected self-care, stress, and overworking. It can lead to a decreased quality of life for physicians and poor healthcare outcomes for patients. Can I get the next slide, please? We began our investigation into our peer sleep quality by gathering a team of UMKC medical students and faculty advisors via the Quality Improvement and Patient Safety workshop offered as part of the CPM1 coursework. We then formulated an initial survey that we sent to all medical students in order to determine how many hours students slept per night. We received 104 responses, which reflected an average of 6.99 hours of sleep per night. We did have a suspicion that although people were sleeping on par with the recommended hours per night, their quality of sleep overall was poor. We then followed up with those respondents in another survey to confirm our suspicions and better understand sleep quality. We decided to measure sleep quality using a 5-point Likert scale that we created, where we set 1 to signify waking up groggy and hitting snooze, as well as 5 to being energized and ready to start the day. Get the next slide. From the second survey, we learned that the average sleep score of UMKC medical students was initially surveyed as a 2.68 on a 5-point Likert scale. Thus, the aim of this quality improvement project is to increase UMKC medical students' sleep score from 2.68 to 3.68 over a 6-month period. Can I get the next slide? So we began by creating a fishbone diagram to identify potential causes to the scores that students had reported. Potential causes broadly fell into 6 categories: schoolwork, electronics usage, mental health, substance abuse, social obligations, and environmental factors, all which cumulatively negatively impacted sleep quality. We identified these particular stressors based on self-reported hindrances to restful sleep, which was obtained from the initial survey that we had sent. Can I get the next slide, please? Based on the fishbone diagram, we then utilized a pick diagram. Thank you. We utilized a pick diagram to identify the highest impact potential interventions. Pick diagrams are used to categorize potential interventions according to difficulty and impact, and we wanted to choose 2 that would be easy to implement with our classmates and would yield the greatest increase in sleep scores. We chose establishing routine sleep schedules in the form of a daily sleep calendar and reducing blue light exposure before bed as the 2 interventions we would then sequentially implement over a 6-month period. We chose to use routine sleep calendars as we felt it was an important aspect of maintaining our work-life balance. As students, we tend to hyper-organize our study habits already, so why not extend these same practices to our sleep hygiene? We offered multiple ways in which for students to do this, such as logging when they went to bed at night and woke up every morning, or simply trying to sleep and wake up at the same times every day. Additionally, we chose to target blue light exposure specifically because of the amount of time we spent using our electronics daily. Given the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has had on how we administer classes, exams, and overall studying, attempting to mitigate blue light exposure can have long-lasting positive effects. We instructed students that they can utilize the night mode function on their devices, wear blue light glasses, or put away electronics altogether 30 minutes before bed. Next slide, please. As students implemented each intervention, we would ask them to re-report their sleep scores via bi-weekly surveys. This represents our outcome measure. We maintain student participation in the surveys by conducting raffles for $5 gift cards for every bi-weekly period, as well as a larger $40 prize for students who participated in every single survey over the course of the 6 months. Our process measure is reported intervention adherence, in which we ask students how many days per week they avidly practice the interventions. Students were given the option to report compliance every weekday, most of the weekdays, some of the weekdays, few of the weekdays, and none of the weekdays. Furthermore, we also asked students to report any negative consequences that they felt that these interventions had to function as our balancing measure. Some students reported sacrificing time dedicated to social events and studies, while some other students stated that no matter what measures they took, their sleep quality did not improve. Next slide, please. Our initial survey, which had 104 responses, and we are displaying pertinent survey findings on this run chart. With the implementation of daily sleep calendars, students reported sleep scores that increased from 2.68 to 3.60 from January 21st to February 18th. After introducing the decreased blue light exposure measures, we observed a slight decline in sleep scores from 3.60 to 3.34 from February 18th to March 4th. Regarding data not presented on the run chart, 46.8% of students reported sleep calendar adherence, while only 19.3% reported blue light exposure compliance. When asked if they experienced any negative consequences to these interventions, 6.7% of students reported feeling as though they sacrificed their school or social life. Next slide, please. UMKC medical students demonstrated an average 0.92 point increase in their sleep scores after implementing a sleep calendar. These scores briefly declined with the addition of a second intervention. However, we recognize that this particular survey period occurred during midterm exams, which may have impacted how students chose to report their scores. Our QI efforts are ongoing, and with continued implementations of the interventions, we hope to sustain the improvement that we saw. We also acknowledge a limitation in the sleep scores and the other data that we received, as they were all received by surveys, which presents a bias in which students, as well as how many students were actively completing the surveys. For each one, we had a minimum of 30 participants, which did maintain our sample size. And we also recognize that sleep scores could potentially be skewed due to underreporting of those sleep scores by participants who were not actively implementing the interventions. Next slide, please. To conclude, overall, both intervention methods that we utilize proved effective in improving sleep quality. This topic will continue to be of importance as medical students develop in their careers as physicians. Tackling the issue of sleep deprivation and improper sleep hygiene early on will only serve to improve physician health and enable us to provide better patient care. Thus, our study advocates for more exploration into sleep quality, as well as increased investment in the support of student self-care. Next slide, please. We would like to extend a gracious thank you to our mentors, Dr. El-Feghaly and Dr. Harris from Children's Mercy Hospital, for their continued support and guidance with our project, as well as for partial funding of our participant incentives. We would also like to thank the UMKC School of Medicine for their support in educating us on quality improvement and providing us with this opportunity for presentation. Thank you, and I am open for questions.
All right, we have a question in the chat box from Nick Clark. Great work, team. It's wonderful seeing medical students involved in QI safety work. Sleep fatigue and sleep deprivation are ubiquitous problems in healthcare. If you were to continue the sleep work, what would be your next steps and future directions?
Yeah, so we are planning, like I said, to stop this project after 6 months, and we were only able to implement 2 of the interventions. But I think my next steps would be to attempt to implement the other interventions that we had displayed on the pic chart. For example, reducing caffeine usage late at night, trying to make our nighttime environment as conducive to our sleep hygiene as possible. And if it were to happen, continuing the survey beyond the 6 months to cover those potential interventions, I think is a great way to continue to monitor the sleep hygiene practices of our classmates.
Great, thank you. From Dr. Paula Nichols, very nice project. For those students that actively engage in this Healthy Sleep program, did they report an improvement in mental health or concentration?
Students were not asked in our surveys about their mental health and concentration. However, that is something that is incredibly important for us to focus on as well. And I will suggest to my teammates if we could broaden our survey and include more survey questions to ask how students feel regarding their academic performance.
Great. And then a comment from Stacy Farr. And provider burnout is now the 4th aim of the IHI triple, now quadruple aim. So great focus on this domain. And then Dr. Betty Dries, it's innovative to use a QI approach to wellness. Are you planning to submit your work for publication?
We are currently working towards submitting this for the IHI submission deadline. I think that's in a couple of weeks.
Great. Another question, what implications do you think the outcomes of your work has on the medical school and its curriculum schedules?
I think some of our findings are very reflective of how students are given their time to use for themselves in their academic and personal lives in relationship to how the school is administering their classes. So for example, in my year, I'm a third year, I know that our classes run from 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. generally, and we have clinic throughout the day as well as workshops. And I know that this leaves very little time for us to study as well as focus on other wellness measures. So I think that seeing just how poor sleep quality can get is a testament to how students have to practice or work on balancing their own sleep with the standards set by the school.
Great, thank you. Have you thought about ways to include a control group so that the variation in exam time could be accounted for?
We did not consider a control group because we kept the surveys open to everyone from across all 6 years. And we were unsure about how to go about doing that, considering every single year has different schedules and not everybody is taking synchronous classes past year 3.
Okay, great. We have a good comment here from Stacy Farr. Use of wearable sleep trackers could be a great future step for you to include more reliable and rich data on sleep. And then a question about from Dr. Paula Nichols. Were you able to assess if there were any male-female differences?
We weren't able to assess if there were any female and male differences directly. However, I was noticing some trends in the survey compliance. Most of our respondents were from females, and if male students were to respond, they were the ones who were leaving comments about their concentration, their thoughts about the implementation process.
Okay, great, thank you. And just to tag on to that, Dr. Jeff Hackman said it would be interesting in the future to look at educational outcomes, like test performance, particularly in light of your comments about the timing of the interventions related to it.
And I think that's an interesting topic as well, and perhaps we can add that onto our surveys. I would wonder if students would be willing to disclose test scores or other information about their academic performance, but I think that is something that's definitely worth looking into.
You had a lot of questions. That's a good thing. Anybody else? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for your time and all of your work.
Thank you.
Congratulations and good luck.